For those wishing to follow along with the PowerPoint, you are encouraged to access the meeting through the Tinley Park television on YouTube. It is my understanding that all members and staff present have checked in on the conference line and we can begin our meeting. Please note, throughout the meeting, we expect to have other individuals joining us via phone call pertaining to specific agenda items. Thanks again in advance for your patience and cooperation through tonight's Plan Commission meeting, which is convening remotely via conference call. This open meeting of the Village of Tinley Park is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Pritzker's Executive Order 2020-07, issued on March 16, 2020, which suspends the Open Meetings Act provisions relating to in-person attendance by members of a public body. The Open Meetings Act, OMA, requires public bodies to allow for public comment. Therefore, this meeting will include public comment via the established protocol. Even if members of the public do not provide comment, participants are advised that people may be listening who do not provide comment, and those persons are not required to identify themselves. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by web or audio conference. This past year, we've gotten used to working remotely and meeting remotely, so I don't feel it's necessary to go over all the protocols again. Just remember to be mindful to wait until I address you, and please keep your phones muted, and when you do speak, please identify yourself by your name first. Thank you. With that, I'll ask the Commission Secretary to please take the roll call.
Can I ask who got on first? Who just got
Yes,
on the
absolutely,
call?
Kathy.
Did someone just join the call?
Yes, Kathleen, it's Kimberly Clark here joining.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. We're just getting ready to take the roll call. Okay, Commissioner
Great,
Engel.
sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Commissioner Engel. Commissioner Manning.
Present.
Commissioner Gatto.
Here.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Commissioner Gaskell.
Present.
Commissioner Aitchison. Commissioner Vick. Commissioner Luscuto. Chairman Gray.
Present. And we do have a quorum. So at this time, this is Chairman Gray. Staff, are there any communications for the Commission?
No.
No.
Okay. This is Chairman Gray. Let us now begin with the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 15, 2021 meeting?
This is Commissioner Gatto, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
This is Commissioner Manning. I second that motion.
Okay, I will ask, this is Chairman Gray. I will ask, or motion made by Commissioner Gatto, seconded by Commissioner Manning. I will ask for a voice vote. Are there any opposed to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Move on to the first item on the agenda. This is Chairman Gray. The first item this evening is the workshop portion for the Bremen Animal Hospital 400 square foot addition located at 7613 159th Street. We also have the public hearing for this project for the variation request immediately following this workshop. Brittany Maddox, on behalf of National Veterinarian Associates, the petitioner, is seeking a variation of 5.5 feet from the required aisle width of 26 feet to allow for an aisle width of 20.5 feet for a portion of the parking lot drive aisle. She is also requesting a variation of 0.19 feet, less than 2 inches, from the required 10-foot side yard setback to allow for a setback of 9.81 feet on the east side of the property. There is also a request for site plan and architectural approval. Staff, please proceed with your presentation at this time.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Paula. Prior to beginning my presentation, I just want to make note that the staff report has been distributed to the Commission and is posted on the website, and that it will be attached to the minutes and made part of the meeting record. As the chairman mentioned, we have two variations and then site and architectural approval. The property is located on 159th Street, 7613, the Bremen Animal Hospital. This was visited back in 2015 when the purchase was made by the National Veterinary Associates, and since it was a special use, we had to take that through a special use at that time. And during that process, we certainly looked at the landscape. There was some new landscaping proposed for the project, and it was approved in that time. This is a business that's been in operation in 1969, a long-standing business in Tinley Park. For efficiency purposes and to keep up with the standard of the industry, they want to add 400 square feet to the front of their building, on the north side of their building. This is in requiring us to take a look at the existing configuration of the building, which has some slight nonconformities, and when I say slight, they're really slight. On the east side, we have a side yard variation of less than 2 inches. And then we also have an existing situation in the parking lot where the drive aisle broke down at the entrance. The remainder of the aisle is at 26 feet, so that is requiring a variation as well. As part of the addition, that pulls in our architectural and site guidelines as well that we need to take a look at. Quick background, the property is Zone B3. This is a permitted use as a special use, as I mentioned, that was approved in 2015. Adjacent to the property on both sides is a B3, our general business and commercial districts. Across the street is Orland Park, that's 159th Street across the street to the north. And to the south is existing multifamily residential uses zoned R5. First, I want to talk about our site plan review. If we could advance to the site plan that shows where the addition is. Right now, there is a mansard shake roof that is supported by columns that encloses and gives some coverage for the existing entry to the building. So they want to take advantage of the existing foundation there and enclose that as part of their entryway and to make for their additional exam rooms. But they are carrying that extension to the east side of the building. So the same 8 plus depth of the enclosure of the open area now will be carried to the east side of the building. The parking lot that exists there, nothing's going to be changed. I think it was striped not that long ago. There are 22 spaces there, inclusive of the accessible space. And looking at the use, our parking, you've heard me get on my soapbox about our parking code, so this is nothing different. We don't really address specifically veterinary clinics, so we went to look at medical clinics just for some guidance. And as the staff report mentions, between the examination rooms and office and the number of employees, the calculation for the space is a requirement of 22 spaces, and that's what they provide, so they meet the parking requirement, which is good. The drive aisle, though, on the west side of the building, I think it's up there on your PowerPoint now, it does meet code at 26 feet at the north end and at the south end, but as you get near that entranceway, it slopes down to 20 feet, just over 20 feet, 20.45 feet, and it's a depth of about 14 feet. The only way they could eliminate this is if they were to take down the columns and the supports and redo the foundation for their enclosure. And for the small area that we're looking at a throwing down of this parking aisle, staff felt that we could support a variation in this area, especially since there are several ways bringing it to the attention of the drivers. There are bollards. They're going to actually install new bollards that are a little bit taller than what's out there now, and they're painting them bright yellow. Yes, striping of the driveway, which brings the attention of the driver that something is going on there. Also makes for safe crosswalk of pedestrians, especially from the accessible space. And there'll be signage as well. So we feel that we've done everything we can to make sure that it's a safe means of ingress and egress along that parking aisle. There's a trash enclosure at the back of the building that's fully enclosed as required by the code. Regarding landscaping, as I mentioned, in 2015, we had a new landscape required and a landscape plan approved. There will be some modifications of that with the expansion to the north. Until we see the impact that has on existing landscape, what we are recommending is the commission condition their site plan approval on final staff approval of the landscape plan to make sure that we're meeting the integrity of the ordinance as well as the adopted landscape plan. The only point of issue was the amount of stone in that area, and I know this was a discussion when they came back and when they went through the process in 2015. Ordinance doesn't allow anything greater than 20% of the landscape area to be stone. They've agreed to reduce that, and so that, along with the impact of the new addition, we'll take a look at that landscaping at the end and get a final approval of a landscape plan. The standards in our code, there are site planning standards, and we'll go through those at the end of the public hearing, but you can see that they touch on such things as safe movement of pedestrians, landscaping, and the arrangement of the buildings with respect to setbacks and so forth. And staff believes that they've adequately met the standards imposed by the site planning guidelines. The first open item then is just to discuss approving the site plan with the condition of a final landscape approval. So we'll move on to the architecture. We can move on to those slides. As you can kind of see from the first, this is the front facade on the north side of the building. And you'll see those vertical brick columns. Those are what exists. The shake roof, I have spoken with the applicant because I was concerned about the condition of the shake roof, and they've agreed to replace them, which I think will really bring up the quality of the building. And then they're going to complement the color, the dark color in the existing brick with a dark brick on the east side of that building, the addition that is new and is not currently undercover. And I think the dark color provides a nice contrast for the sign that they're proposing for the building. The only concern I had was how the new brick color was going to transition on the east side. I think on the north facade, it transitions with that vertical element of the brick column. But if you look on the east facade, I was concerned about the abrupt change in brick color. However, if you notice, I know there's a little bit of a lag, but there's a picture that shows you what that facade looks like from the 159th, and it's really difficult even to see that side of the building between the landscaping and the adjacency of the building to the east. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and see whether that would be a concern that any of you might have. As our architectural guidelines require, anytime there is an addition, we make sure that we're matching the existing material. We're certainly looking at another masonry material, and that we've offered a good transition from the old material to the new material. So as I mentioned, the condition of the shake roof shingles is a concern, and staff is recommending that you make this a condition of your approval. There are several guidelines for architectural review. Staff has reviewed those and feel that the addition meets the intent of the architectural guidelines. The only point that I wanted to address was the east facade. And as I mentioned, I think that's mitigated by the existing vegetation and the adjacency of the building to the east. So that was the open item number 2, discussing the new brick color for the addition and making sure that the roof replacement is a condition of approval. So that completes the architectural and site review. Let's move on to the zoning request. So there are 2 variations. The first one, as I mentioned, is the throating down of that drive aisle. Our ordinance requires it to be 26 feet. Actually, I just noticed in our staff report that I have had that down as 24 feet. It's actually supposed to be 26 feet. So the reduction is to 20.45 feet in that area, and it's for a distance of about 14 feet. And as I mentioned, attention is being drawn to the reduction of the aisle width with the striping on the pavement, signage, and the new bollards that they're going to provide. The second variation is very minor, but since we were already going through the public hearing process, we wanted to bring the property into legal non-conforming status. There's a slight angle of the building as well, which really doesn't make much difference, a couple inches, in fact. But the limiting dimension is 9.84 feet to the east property line, where the setback requirement is 10 feet. So the variation request is 0.16 feet. So we have two variations. The first one being, and I want to make sure I had the, it's like 5.5 feet. I think I had the variation listed as the right variation in the executive summary. I just had it noted incorrectly in the staff report. So we have 4 open items. The first one being condition and site plan on the final landscape approval. The second being for site plan approval. We want to make sure everyone's in agreement with the brick color and place a condition on the site plan approval of the roof replacement. The third being the drive aisle width variation, and the fourth being the side yard variation. And that concludes my report for the workshop portion of the meeting.
Okay, this is Chairman Gray. Thanks, Paula, for the detailed report. At this time, I am going to ask the commissioners if they have any comments or discussion for staff on this matter. Focus on those 4 open items that Paula had just mentioned. And we will begin with Commissioner Manny. Commissioner Manny, please unmute.
Yeah, I was on mute, sorry. I think at this time I don't have any comments.
Okay. Commissioner Gatto, any comments?
Staff did a great job. I agree with the roofing needing to be replaced as a condition. Other than that, I think it looks great.
Excellent. Commissioner West.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Gaskell.
I have a couple of questions. That side drive variance, where exactly is it come down to the 20 feet?
Right at the entrance, Commissioner Gaskell. So kind of across from the accessible parking lot.
Okay, so
I think Dan put the slide up there. So if you see where the yellow area is, and that slide, what's in the red box, red dashed line, that's the area that gets down to 20 and a half feet.
so it goes down to 20 and a half feet, then on to 159th Street. Is that what you're saying?
Just a point of fact that actually in our legacy code, we actually allow drive aisles of that width, just not in the rest of the village.
There's space there, so this is at the entrance to the building, so then I don't know how much feet it is. Looks like there's another 35 to 40 feet from where it throws down before it gets to 159.
Okay, my ultimate question is why does it have to be that? Why does it have to be narrowed down?
That's because of the existing structure of the building. I don't know, Dan, if you can go back to the front facade. There's existing brick columns there. So that condition exists right now. That's the way it is right now. And those brick columns that you see in the front of the building, they're filling that in as part of the addition.
Oh, okay, I see.
Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. Why, if has the code been 26 feet for a long time? Why was it built that way originally?
Well, the building is there. I mean, I think they've been in operation, what did I say, 50 years or something like that? So I couldn't tell you what the code was at that time. I'm sorry.
Okay.
They've been in operation since 1969.
And most of our zoning code now was 1978, so some of it's been changed over time,
So
but
back then it was 20 feet.
it could have been. I don't think I can tell you
Okay.
that for sure, but it was a different zoning code at the time.
Okay.
It could have been 20, it could
The
have been
other thing
26.
that's kind of nice, I guess it's a way to look at this in a positive way, when you have this kind of throating down, it acts as a traffic calming measure. And so when this sort of thing happens, just like in some areas where the drives are all 20 feet, it encourages the drivers to slow down in the parking lot, which is a good thing.
Okay. 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 That's all I had.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, thanks, Commissioner Gaskell. And my comments, I'm going to echo this Chairman Gray. I'm going to echo what Commissioner Gatto said regarding, the roof shingles. I think that's a fair ask. And, just to add to what staff said for Commissioner Gaskell's comments, my understanding was that they want to reuse those footings around those columns or that canopy area, and therefore as a cost savings measure. And so I think to Paula's point about the 20.5 feet, it does encourage people to slow down. You have the striping, so a lot of those factors together, combined with, I believe, the reuse of the foundations, I think that that's a reasonable variation. And then, of course, open item number 4, I don't think anybody has an issue with, less than 2 inches. It's going to match the existing building as it is, so it'll bring that up to snuff. So I don't have any other comments other than that. Does the petitioner at this time have anything they'd like to present or add on this item while we're in the workshop?
Sorry about that. I was trying to find my mute button. This is Mike Mathis with Linden Group Architects. I do not have anything to add unless there's any additional questions. I'd like to thank Paula for the nice presentation.
Okay. I will ask the commissioners if you guys have any questions for Mike, please speak up now. Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the public hearing portion of this project. I did receive confirmation of the public hearing being posted. May I have a motion to open the public hearing at this time?
Commissioner Gaskell, I make the motion.
This is Commissioner West. I second the motion.
This is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner Gaskell, seconded by Commissioner West. I will ask for a voice vote. Are there any opposed to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter will be sworn in at this time. But first, I'd like to ask staff if there's anything further to add.
This is Paula. No, sir.
Okay. So again, does the petitioner have anything they would like to present or add on this item? Mike, if you want me to swear you in, I can swear you in just so if there's any other additional comments, you can speak freely.
If you would like to do that, that would be fine. I also I believe I have someone from the Bremen here, Diana Baumgartner, and I have a representative of the developer, Tim Burke. But it doesn't sound like there's going to be any additional questions, so we can wait to see if there are any.
Sure. We'll wait, and then that way, if questions come up, we'll swear you in and Diana and the rest. So At this time, I'll ask, is there anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item? No? Hearing none, we will, I'll move on to the commissioners. Commissioners, is there any further discussion on any of the items? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
This is Commissioner Gatto, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Manning, I second that motion.
This is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner Gatto, seconded by Commissioner Manning. I will ask for a voice vote. Are there any opposed to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Again, I'll ask the commission if there's any further comments. Speak up. Okay, hearing no further comments. Staff, can you review the draft standards of approval of these requests?
Yes, Chairman, this is Paula. The first standards relate to the site plan approval, and basically it's looking at the orientation of the buildings, which we have an existing condition there, so it really wasn't a lot to consider there. I think the biggest issue was the drive aisle, which a variation is being requested to bring that into legal nonconformance status. There was also one of the standards is looking at the landscaping, and as I mentioned, we're certainly going to revisit that again after construction to see what has survived the construction, and that's why staff had recommended that we make that a condition of approval. The next set of standards relate to architectural standards. I didn't hear anyone have any concern about the change in brick color. That would be under the cohesive building design, so there doesn't appear to be a concern about that. There's a defined entry, obviously, and I think that is probably one of the better elements of the development. And the roof line, as we mentioned, the shake roof adds a quality to the building, but we're certainly looking at the ability to see those shakes replaced to add to the quality of the building. So the standards for variation, as you're aware, there are 3 statutory requirements for any variation granted by the village. The first being that the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return if it's permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations. As I mentioned, the variation requests are basically bringing existing conditions into legal nonconformance. The side yard is less than 2 inches, and the drive aisle is looking at a variation of 5.5 feet for a very small portion of the drive aisle. The second being that the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances, and again, it's the fact that these are existing conditions that we're trying to bring into legal nonconforming status. And the third being that the variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Again, an existing building, the existing entryway is being enclosed, so that's an existing situation that the locality is used to. The setbacks are all met for the front yard and setback from 159th Street. So essentially the character of the locality has not been disturbed. And that concludes my standards, Chairman.
Okay. This is Chairman Gray. Thank you, Paula, for reviewing the standards. At this time, I will ask for motions to be given. I may have the first motion. There's going to be 2 for the site plan approval.
For one.
This is Commissioner West. Oh. Am I okay to go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, this is Commissioner West. I make a motion to grant the petitioner, Brittany Maddox-Genelin, on behalf of the National Veterinary Associates, site plan and architectural approval in accordance with the plan submitted and listed in the May 6, 2021 staff report, conditioned upon final landscape approval and replacement of the roof shakes.
This is Commissioner Gaskell. I second that.
This is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Gaskell Secretary, may I have a roll call?
Commissioner Manny,
Yes.
Commissioner Gatto,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaskell,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Okay, the motion is carried. This is Chairman Gray. Commission, may I have the motion for the first variation?
This is Commissioner Gatto. I make a motion to recommend that the village board grant the petitioner Brittany Maddox on behalf of National Veterinary Associates a 5.5-foot variation from the required 26-foot drive aisle width to allow a drive aisle width of 20.5 feet for a small portion of the driveway in accordance with the plans submitted and listed herein, and adopt findings of fact as proposed by the village staff in the May 6, 2021 staff report.
This is Commissioner Manny. I second that motion.
This is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner Gatto, seconded by Commissioner Manny. Secretary, may I have a roll call?
Commissioner Manny,
Yes.
Commissioner Gatto,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaskell,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. This is Chairman Gray. The motion is carried. Commission, may I have a motion for the second variation?
This is Commissioner Gaskill. I make a motion. We recommend that the village board grant a petitioner, Brittany Maddox, gentleman, on behalf of National Veterinary Associates, a 0.19 foot, less than 2 inches, variation of the required 10-foot side yard setback to allow for a side yard setback of 9.81 feet on the east side of the property in accordance with the plans submitted and listed herein, and adapt findings of fact as proposed by the village staff in the May 6th, 2021 staff report.
This is Commissioner West. I second that motion.
This is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner Gaskell, seconded by Commissioner West. Secretary, may I have a roll call?
Commissioner Manny,
Yes.
Commissioner Gatto,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaskell,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. This is Chairman Gray. The motion is carried. This will go to the village board on May 18th, 2021. Mike, Diana, and the rest of your team, please get with village staff on how you attend the meeting. And thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Chairman, I might add, because we have unanimous approvals, that this will just take one approval at the village board meeting, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Paula. We will move on to item 2. The second item, this is Chairman Gray, the second item on the agenda this evening is a workshop to consider recommending approval of the site plan and architecture for an existing building 17111 to 17119 LaGrange Road, formerly 9561 171st Street, in the B3 PD General Business and Commercial Park Hills Town Center PUD zoning district. The proposed project allows for the former MD Financial / Fifth Third Bank building to be converted to a multi-tenant commercial building that includes a Starbucks coffee drive-through. Staff, please make your presentation at this time.
Thanks, Chairman. And as our usual background, a copy of the staff report will be attached to the minutes. You guys have it, and it's available online. So that's our usual intro to these. Instead of repeating everything we say in the summary, we'll just attach the staff reports. So As a quick background, I'll say this workshop and then the next workshop are both for both separate projects, but it's the same developer and ultimately the same kind of main tenant that's driving it. The developer for these projects is Vacuity. Most of you, I believe, were on the commission when the 7-Eleven gas station on 171st and Harlem came before the Plan Commission for rezoning, site plan approval, plat and variations. So this is the same developer that did that. This is kind of their bread and butter too, I believe. They do 7-Elevens, and they've done a lot of those in the Chicagoland area especially. But kind of their other thing they do is kind of outlot multi-tenant buildings. So they've developed, remodeled, and managed a number of these different projects. I call them kind of outlot buildings, but a strip center, kind of the same thing, most of the time kind of out by the roadway with 3, 4, or 5 multiple tenants on the property. So the first project here before you guys is an existing building, an existing site that was previously MB Financial. I think that's most people remember it as that. It was Fifth Third Bank for a short time, and originally, I believe, American Chartered Bank. So it's gone through a number of transitions, but it's been a bank for a number of times. It also has typically had an address on 171st Street, which most of that development and that shopping center is addressed off of, but this really fronts LaGrange Road. So we have altered the addressing with this development because we kind of like to keep the full addresses for each tenant, not use unit numbers, things like that. So we assigned it a new address and thought LaGrange Road was a better address to kind of give this instead of the 171st Street that the bank previously had.
Little pizzazz.
What's it?
I say a little pizzazz.
Yeah. Yep. And I think normally you want to kind of be off the main road as well. So, as a background on this site, again, the site is in the Park Hills Town Center development. This was primarily developed and approved in 2006 and 2007. It has Lou Malnati's, Frankie's Restaurante, the CVS Pharmacy outlet, and previously Tribe's Ale House, which is vacant now, but it's a nice looking kind of high quality commercial development that's out there. And this is an outlet kind of on the southwest corner of that development. Again, constructed 2007 with most of the rest of that shopping center. This, again, was American Chartered Bank for 2006 to 2016. In 2016, it went to MB Financial, and then briefly was Fifth Third Bank. All those were bank acquisitions of the previous bank. So Fifth Third Bank kind of closed some of their branches when they combined with MB Financial because there was some kind of duplicity there. So this has been vacant since July 2019. It has been used as a bank office, which surprised me when I showed up and I had a security guard chase me down out there while I was taking pictures. So it was vacant for a while, but they have kind of used it as a bank office in the short term. I think that's helped them through the pandemic, just have available office space. So the original meeting minutes on this property as well just kind of noted nonchalantly in 2006 that this could obviously be easily converted to something that's not a bank, because at the time they were a little worried, okay, this is prime retail space, can it be something else if the future held that for it? And I think at the time they were thinking this could be maybe a standalone restaurant or something of that magnitude, but it's before you guys today, obviously with a conversion in mind to kind of a multi-tenant building in a restaurant for a Starbucks before you guys today. One other thing that happened with this site in 2015 was the LaGrange reconstruction. So in 2015, there was actually a taking along LaGrange Road that actually shrank their parking lot slightly. So it actually took a small row of parking out that was kind of in the middle. They did add those diagonal striped parking stalls to the south that weren't originally there. And that allowed for IDOT to obviously expand the LaGrange Road right away, as well as put in the sidewalk and redesign some utilities over there as well. So again came a total reduction of 4 stalls on the site compared to what they had previously, and also reduced some of their landscaping and buffer yards that were previously compliant along the west side. So that did go through an approval process there in 2015 to basically redesign that parking lot based on the IDOT takings that happened out there. And here, this is just a picture of the original site plan. So from 2006 for the bank, you can see there kind of that original design of and what was originally constructed of the parking lot, as well as you can see kind of the stacking on the east side, as well as the traffic flow, if you kind of pay attention, because for the most part, that's kind of staying the same. They're adding in they're changing the site plan a lot, but the general traffic flow kind of stays the same out here. From a zoning perspective, again, this is located in the Park Hills Town Center PUD. That shopping center is primarily to the east of it, and then to the north of it is the CVS. To the south of it is the Great Escape. There is still a vacant pad that's out there by the Great Escape between this property and the Great Escape building that could house something in the future. It's partially in a B3 zoning and partially in an R6 zoning, which I'm not sure if that's an error or not, but I think the thought process is it would be some kind of commercial use or office use or something like that on that vacant pad that's out there. And then to the west of this is the Orland grassland, which is unincorporated and Cook County Forest Preserve property to the west across LaGrange Road. Overall, what they're looking to do here is really convert this bank building to have a Starbucks that would, a multi-tenant building, one of those tenants being a Starbucks that would have a drive-through lane and a window. The building's 5,593 square feet in total size, and there's about 5,241 that's leasable space, with that other space kind of being more mechanical, sprinkler rooms, space that wouldn't be used by tenants. The Starbucks takes a little less than half of that at 2,364 square feet, and that's leaving, so 2 other tenant spaces there. There are 2 potential tenant spaces, so depending on who they get, it could be 1 tenant, or it could end up being 2, depending on kind of who they get and the quality tenants that they're looking for to kind of pair with Starbucks out here. So again, that could be anything kind of allowed by the B3 and that PUD, and there's no other really use allowances, so anything that would be in a B3 could be permitted in those other 2 spaces that are there. The site plan, so there's several kind of site plan changes here. The most significant is obviously the removal of the bank drive up and the canopy that's on the east side, and then the installation of a drive-through lane for Starbucks. So those are kind of the primary things that you'll see here. The circulation again kind of remains the same. So counterclockwise, the western lane is a 2-way lane, and then the south and east sides are kind of 1-way lanes that do that counterclockwise fashion, and what that will be the direction of the drive-through lane as well there. The north side lane as well is a 2-way lane, and that connects into the larger Park Hills shopping center development. And then parking is added on the east side where those bank drive-up lanes were. So they kind of moved the one-way aisles that are on the south side where they installed the drive-through lane and needed the space for that. So they kind of moved those over to the east side of the property now. So drive-through ordering kind of happens at the south end of that. That's the screen, the specific location of the sign will come in with the sign permit, but they have a decent estimate there. It'll be on the south side, and then we're gonna have it basically as far east as we can get it. There is some electrical and some utility boxes that are over there, so they will try and push it as far east as we can, but it'll kind of depend on where those utilities boxes are put. This has an estimate of between 9 and 10 vehicles that'll stack within this kind of designated lane that's out there before it would then kind of be in the drive aisle in front of the building. So there was a parking and traffic analysis here by KLOA that shows kind of adequate drive-through lane stacking, adequate parking as well. It's not going to be a surprise, I don't think, to anyone to say Starbucks is busy. We've all been there and seen pretty large stacking lines, so that was kind of one of our main concerns, to make sure at least the site design prevents stacking out into public roads. So if there is kind of overflow beyond what they show here, it really stacks within the site, which is what we want to see. While that's not great maybe for the tenants that are in the building, they're going to choose to be next to a Starbucks, and I have a feeling they're going to know there's going to be a lot of traffic, and that's actually probably part of the reason why they choose to locate next to Starbucks. So, but it really doesn't go off their property. It won't go onto the shopping center property or LaGrange Road, which are really our main concerns there. So, from a Tinley Park perspective, we are actually, I think, in need of more Starbucks. So. I know the one on 159th and Harlem can get pretty busy, but hopefully this will share some of that demand. I think there's a pent-up demand here for Starbucks, so people will go far and wide for them. And then hopefully also people going to either Mokina or Orland will go here instead, if it's closer to them, and keep the money within Tinley. So. We're excited to have them, and then hopefully have a couple other tenants here as well. And again, this is kind of similar to the other projects that we had in Brookside Marketplace, which was the conversion of an old Bank of America bank, and they had Chipotle go in there with a pickup window. So obviously banks are kind of falling by the wayside. Most of that's happening online now. Or via apps. People really just kind of need an ATM. So the days of Friday long stacking lanes at banks are gone, and they tend to close a lot of them. So we're seeing a lot of these kind of conversions, which are beneficial because a lot of them are set up with at least some level of vehicle drive-through circulation already, kind of indicative of them. So we like to see this. I think it's better from an economic development and use perspective than, let's say, another bank there. So to actually have commercial tenants that drive traffic, sales tax, and convenience for residents. The other addition on this is the 2 parking stalls that you'll see on the southeast corner of the property, as well as the new dumpster enclosure they add on the property. So that is really, the existing dumpster enclosures across that drive aisle is kind of small. So they have a bigger and closer dumpster enclosure here, which is going to be more convenient for Starbucks and the other 2 tenants to be able to utilize that. And then they're converting the existing dumpster enclosure area to those parking stalls that are on the southeast corner. So since there's some space there and it's already kind of developed and dug out, they'll put a couple stalls there as well. So the dumpster enclosure is going to be constructed of brick, which will match or be very similar to the existing building. Then on the northwest side of this, you'll see there's a patio there that they'll be adding for the Starbucks tenant for outdoor dining. Obviously, with COVID, that's become a big deal, but I think was popular with them even before COVID. So they've shown a patio there as well. Lastly, they're adding a sidewalk that runs from the sidewalk on LaGrange all the way into their site. So this is compliance with village codes to have sidewalk connections as well as accessibility codes. And this wasn't there originally because it was constructed prior to there being sidewalks on LaGrange Road. So they didn't really have anything to connect to, and I think IDOT even kind of squashed it because they kind of knew they were going to go out there and tear it up within the next few years. And I think they did for about 10 years. So probably a good thing they didn't do it at that time, but with this redevelopment, we get that pedestrian connection in there as well here. So our open item is really just a general review of those site plan changes, the layout, the site circulation, and then the drive-through stacking, which is really kind of one of the main things we paid attention to here to make sure there isn't kind of any negative effects that would spill off of the development site. Landscaping-wise, so there's not really a full landscape review here because it's an existing site. We do look to enhance it though, and they've done a good job here, I think especially along LaGrange Road where they've added some kind of front landscaping to really make it look attractive from LaGrange. And that's kind of a steeper incline there going up to LaGrange Road, so it is a little difficult to plant going up, but they do kind of keep it around the parking lot, add landscaping there. They also add landscaping around the foundation of the building and add a couple trees at the rear as well where they're adding end islands. So there is a loss of one tree here, I believe, but they're adding two on the east side that will kind of help offset those losses and create a more attractive landscape here when people enter the property. Architecturally, so the building's architecture is going to generally remain about the same and currently meets our architectural guidelines as well as the PUD has some kind of guidelines as well in it that kind of tie this into the CVS building to the car wash that's over there and then the larger development. So generally this is going to stay the same. It's got the kind of red-brown brick as well as a stone base. There'll be a metal canopy that's added over the Starbucks entrance, and then there's also kind of changes to the storefront system where the two tenants will come in on the south side of the building or on the right side of that kind of first picture that you see there. They have shown adding some ephes to the top of that where it's currently brick. It kind of has a stone or the runner kind of going through it that you can see through the rest of the building. So they show placing some ephes there on the front facade, the west elevation, as well as on the south side or that side elevation. So staff's main comments with this was basically just to, on the front facade, understanding the goal is to allow for kind of tenants to come and go, and then for signs to be kind of easily installed and maintained there. You typically do get that ephes on top. It's just kind of unique here because we have an existing building that's mainly brick. We do kind of want it to tie into the rest of the building. So we are looking to see if they can maybe explore some alternative designs there with a little less ephes or brick around it to frame it a little better. And then on the south side, staff's recommendation is really to remove that ephes panel they've added. It's just kind of an awkward transition on that south side between the ephes and the brick that exists there now. So we'd still allow for a sign on that, and it might need to be mounted a little differently. They can do like backer plates or something like that. I know it's a little difficult with brick to kind of drill through it, but that one, we can still allow a sign over there. They just may need to find a different way to mount it to that brick, so that way we don't kind of get that awkward look on the south side. So staff's other open item is to review those facade changes. I also have these two kind of alternative designs, which may not have been in your original PowerPoint. So Paula did me a favor and kind of threw a couple options that kind of keeps those ephes areas on the facade, but adds a little bit of brick over there. So depending on if they had one or two tenants, this at least kind of helps the transition a little bit there. Preference would maybe be to keep it brick, but they can maybe explore that and see if there's ways, if they're comfortable mounting signs to what's out there now, or if not, maybe explore these alternative options. So again, that's our second open item here. So look at those ephes bands on the two facades. The east side of this, where the bank canopy used to be, and then where the pickup window for Starbucks will be, that does have some small changes there. And you can see there's a brick band kind of above the building as well, or above the window there that they'll be filling in as well, with a slightly different color brick than what's out there. So that's, I guess, another point is they could tie that into just the rest of the building. I think they like to keep a slightly different look, though, for what they consider their anchor tenant, which here is going to be Starbucks. So that gives it a little bit of a different look there by the window. For signage, they are proposing to really just utilize the existing sign that's out there. So they'll be replacing the box, but it essentially looks the same. And they'll use the same base and foundation and generally be the same size. So there'll be space there for Starbucks signage, as well as then an additional 1 to 2 tenants, depending on how many locate in there. Typically, we want to see other signage as well, that if tenants are known, to see that ahead of time and really make sure they meet our requirements. The petitioners really said that's going to be up to Starbucks on this property. The one concern we did have was with the drive-through signage, and we really only allow for one drive-through sign. So we don't allow for the preview menu board. So if they want a preview menu board, they're going to have to come back through this process. And the petitioner said they understood that, and that only one is permitted, and Starbucks would need to come back through for a variation or a substantial deviation of the PUD to allow for that. So we've generally allowed for it, and I know we've even talked about maybe that's something we look at for code changes to allow a second one, but we just wanted to bring that up. Otherwise, the wall signage and everything like that should be able to meet our code requirements that are kind of applied throughout the rest of the village. Parking, I guess, is kind of the last thing I'll touch on here. There is, based on our requirements, so for these kind of commercial shopping centers, we have a generic 6.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet for these planned commercial shopping centers. And that's really because you have uses come and go out of them. So it's not realistic to say a certain amount might be a restaurant, a certain amount might be a medical use. So we kind of have just a generic parking space total in there. I tend to see it be a little high. In 2021, it was dates back to 1978, and it maybe made sense then. So I think we found that to be on the high side for a number of our developments. Regardless, they actually meet it here, so that amounts to 34 stalls that they'd have to have, and they have 35 stalls total. In a perfect world, I think more of those stalls would be on the west side of this property, near the front entrances. Most of them are kind of on the east side, or not most of them, I guess slightly less than half of them are on the east side or by that drive aisle. So they still have stalls there in front, but again, with that IDOT taking it, kind of reduced that front parking area. And the petitioner has been open to, obviously, Starbucks employees as well as the future tenant employees can be told to park on the east side parking and then leave that front area open for customers. And that happens just kind of naturally by the businesses wanting to make sure there's convenience for customers. But it's good to know the petitioners also stated that that's likely going to be their direction towards their tenants as well. The ADA stalls have been slightly redesigned here as well. So a change from when this was originally approved till now is that you can kind of share that aisle between the ADA spaces. So they were actually able to pick up one ADA stall or one traditional parking stall by sharing that aisle between the two ADA spaces. And then lighting-wise, they are proposing basically to use the existing fixture or use the existing poles, but they'll be replacing some of the fixtures on the poles as well as the building with more LED efficient fixtures. And so that plan meets all our lighting requirements for kind of light intensity. And then all of the fixtures are also downcast full cutoff, so that means they're not angled out, and you can't really see the light source if you're just walking by, unless you're under it. So that prevents any glare from going off the site onto the roadway or other properties. So I think that's all I have for the workshop here, and I'll give it back to you, Chairman, to discuss.
Okay, thanks, Dan. This is Chairman Gray. At this time, I'm going to ask if any of the commissioners have any comments or discussion on any of these open items that Dan mentioned in his presentation. And I will begin with Commissioner West. Any comments?
Yeah, the only thing I have to add is with regards to bicycle parking. I know it's one of the pedestrian-friendly requirements, but I just didn't see anything on the site plan, and I wondered if that had been taken into consideration, where they're going to put that.
Yeah, I don't think we actually have that in our traditional zoning code. I know it's in our legacy district, but I think it's a good idea. We're trying to do that throughout the village.
I thought I saw it on the, let me see if I can find it in the presentation, or in the package. At any rate, I think I would very strongly encourage it, especially given the location and how we're trying to promote connectivity between these areas.
I agree. So we can maybe let the petitioner respond to that later, but I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Thanks, Commissioner West. Commissioner Gatto, any comments?
No comments.
Okay. Commissioner Gaskell.
Nothing here.
Commissioner Manny.
For open item one, I'm fine with, the overall proposed site plan changes, layout, circulation, drive-through stacking. But for open item number 2, regarding the ethos, you have proposed, I think it would look better if that ethos had a brick border that matched the structure. And then this way, you could utilize the ethos, and then, for proposed tenants that move in, installation is easier. And then if that tenant moves out and another one comes in, patching ethos it's easier than try to, patch brick and make sure it looks fine, in the end. So, both elevations, west and south, I think they should be bordered by, by brick, I think like similar to like the structure adjacent to it, the CVS, I think their signage is on E6.
Correct.
So, right. So again, why they E6? Because if the, who knows, if the signs change or the logo change, they can make the installation, better. Be seamless. Again, just because of E6 construction, it's just easy to patch. And it'll look good. But that's it. That's all my comments.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Manning. This is Chairman Gray. I just have a few comments. The traffic flow looks fine. Going on the west side, around the south side to the east, I think it looks fine. I generally like the layout. I like the patio. And Starbucks does bang up business. My wife goes to the one on Harlem and 159th, and they usually have, that's kind of a tighter area, so it's not quite the same as this, but they have a lot of stacking issues backed up. And I don't think looking at the KLOA report and looking at the project design, that will be an issue. I do have a concern. I just want clarification for the dumpster pad location, for the trash corral. I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the plans right. I know they're going to come out from the back side or the east side of their buildings, all three tenants. Is that a concrete sidewalk along the east portion of the building, the east perimeter, and then does that daylight to another? Is that striped, or is that actually a sidewalk per se that goes across the drive-through lane and then up to the dumpster enclosure? I can't tell if that's like a utility or if that is something that's supposed to be marked like a crosswalk. Because I do think at the very least, wherever they cross that drive-through lane, which we know Starbucks does a lot of business in the drive-through lane, that you'd at least have to have some sort of crosswalk painted, to get the tenants from the east side of the building there to the dumpster enclosure when they take out their trash. Man?
Yeah, so they do have that is a sidewalk kind of in the back next to, that kind of runs on the east side of the building next to the drive-through lane. So that is a walkway there. You kind of need that for any back doors, I believe. You kind of need a path or an area there of refuge. So I don't think it's going to be it's not going to be like a truly accessible path, but it will be a concrete path there for them to wheel out the garbage and go south. And then they do have it striped out to kind of have a path to that dumpster enclosure, so that way their employees can kind of get to it. And then that is a striped area that's kind of separating the drive aisle and then the drive-through lane. So that's
Okay.
just to kind of delineate the two areas.
Okay, good. Good enough. I just wanted to know. I couldn't tell. I think that's a good idea, so that keeps some sort of uniformity. All three tenants crossing at the same spot, and to follow that little path. And as long as it's striped, it should be visible to the people in the drive-through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And whether they use that or not,
my-
I'm not sure. Sometimes you have employees that might just try and walk, but I think if you have people in that drive-through, they're going to want to go down and closer to it. So that's what their plan is.
I mean, honestly, you're right. There may be some renegades here and there that say, "Oh, I don't need to stay within the lines." The bigger issue is Starbucks, especially during peak hours. I'm sure there'll be traffic along that east side of the building quite frequently. So I think it'll be a matter of it's more of a matter of safety and then ability to cross. I think it'll probably, maybe I guess when it slows down, that's when they'll change the garbage anyhow. They won't wait. But if it's stacked up, they gotta move it regardless. So, okay, well, I'm glad they have. I just wanted clarification on that. I couldn't tell exactly from the drawings, but you clarified it, Dan. That was my main comment. I do like I like the foresight and the designers that said you could take off the canopy to repurpose the building. To me, I think that's awesome, and I think this is going to be an excellent repurposing of this building. Like I said before, I know Starbucks does bang-up business, and you got that subdivision that's being built right north of 171st Street. So to Commissioner West's point, it may not be bad to have a bicycle rack because you're probably going to have a lot more traffic and some locals. I do, again, echo what Commissioner West said about the connectivity. I think having that sidewalk there is a good idea, too. So regarding the EPIS, I do like what staff recommended on one of the slides that is not in our staff report. Yes. I believe, yes. Where it's broken up with some brick. But again, Commissioner Manny, who's an architect by profession, he had some thoughts on what could be done, and as long as the petitioner is willing to work with staff for something that is mutually agreeable, I think a tasteful alternative can be chosen. But I do agree about the abruptness on that south side in terms of removing it. I think that's probably a good staff recommendation. I think as long as the petitioner works with staff to explore different designs on that west side, again, I think there could be, something that is mutually, agreeable to both parties. With that, those are my comments for the workshop. If is the petitioner present and would like to speak at this time?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I am David Sossin, S-O-S-I-N. My office is at 9501 West 144th Place in Orland Park. I am the attorney for the petitioner. I had the pleasure of originally doing this shopping center many years ago, so I know a bit about the history and the tenants and some of the decisions that were made. And I also did the 7-Eleven, which is connected to the next project before the board over a year ago. With me is Javier Milan, who's a principal in KLOA, who worked on the report, and we felt that it was important that we be here today, minimize the number of people that are here, but certainly have a presence and be able to address any of the commissioners, whether they're here in person or certainly on Zoom. So the comment, just a couple comments on some of the issues which I know the Plan Commission has indicated they're concerned about. We will certainly address with the staff the EFS questions and the desirability of having some flexibility and signage on that south elevation and on the west elevation. I want to make you aware, and my client made me very much aware of it, the fact that Starbucks is a very hands-on national tenant, and they have some requirements, and they have seen the site plan, and we envision that as being a three-way conversation rather than a two-way conversation. We need to include them in here because they've essentially approved the site and approved the repurpose of the building, but now if we work on some sort of a change there, we think we can do it certainly to the approval of the village standards and standards of Starbucks. With the second issue being the bike rack, that's a very common issue in these kinds of centers. We would work with the staff to figure out the appropriate type of a bike rack and the location of that bike rack. especially with the development of Orland Ridge going in across the street in Orland Park, which is progressing rapidly now as the building season really starts ramping up. And we would envision that there will be some people who will address it from the local neighborhood to Starbucks. 60% of their business nationally is by auto, but that still leaves other people arriving there by bike, and mostly by car. So we will do that as well. So I think the remaining issues are issues that certainly we can not only address, but we can satisfy. And Javier, any input from you on?
Good evening. My name is Javier Milan. I'm a principal of KLOA Incorporated. And one thing that I just wanted to mention is that regarding the stacking, our observations showed a maximum stacking of 11 vehicles twice in the morning. Starbucks data shows anywhere between 10 and 12, so it's been very consistent. And I believe your consultant has seen 13, so they're still in the same magnitude. The good thing about this side and the other side that you will see is that all the stacking occurs internally, which I think it's always a positive. And should additional stacking be required, normally this happens in the morning when the other businesses either are closed for business or they're doing very minimal business. So as such, it has a lower impact. I just wanted to leave you with that thought. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Javier, thanks for the clarifications. I appreciate it. This is Chairman Gray. Obviously you have some data from Starbucks as well, so it looks like there's sufficient room there, and you do have that bypass lane. So I do think it won't be an issue at this location. And then, David, thank you again for your comments. I appreciate the openness to work with staff, and as you mentioned, it sounds like the EFIS will be a three-way conversation with staff, you, and Starbucks, and I'm sure something mutually agreeable can be decided upon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, I just want to say that there will be a vote on this at the May 20th Plan Commission meeting. So,
Yes.
David and Javier, get with staff on how you can attend.
I'll note that
Or
that's been changed to May 27th now. So we're having that special meeting.
I apologize.
So, sorry about that.
Yeah, May 27th. So I misspoke. Javier and David, please get with staff on how to attend. You may be there in person just like you are today, and we appreciate that. With that, good luck, gentlemen, and we'll move on to the next item, which you guys are involved with as well. So,
Thank you.
The third and last item this evening is a workshop to consider recommending that the Village Board grant Equity LLC, the contract purchaser/owner, a map amendment to rezone the subject properties from R1, single-family residential, to a B1, neighborhood shopping zoning district. Additionally, the petitioner is requesting a special use for a planned unit development, PUD, with exceptions from the zoning ordinance on both the subject site and the neighboring 7-Eleven site currently under construction. The request will permit a multi-tenant building with a Starbucks drive-through to be constructed at the properties located at 17120 to 17126 Harlem Avenue. Architecture, site plan, and final plat approval will also be considered at the meeting. Staff, please make your presentation on this workshop item at this time.
Thanks. Thanks, Chairman. This, again, the staff report will be attached to the minutes. Instead of repeating everything I'm going to go over here, because it's essentially the same thing, and I want to save my secretary some time. So, so this is, in a lot of ways, similar to what we just went over in terms of a multi-tenant kind of outlot strip center building. Again, kind of equities, I think, bread and butter there, and they have a lot of, they've worked with Starbucks before on these properties. So I feel confident they kind of know what they're putting forward here. This one does have a little bit more to it because it's obviously not an existing site. So on top of kind of the site plan and architectural approvals, We do have rezoning attached to this, as well as plat approval, and then they're proposing to put a PUD really over this site and the 7-Eleven site, which we thought was beneficial. It's kind of what we wanted to do when the 7-Eleven site came forward, but they didn't quite have control of these properties yet, and there was a lot of unknowns there about how it would develop. So at that time, we just moved forward with the 7-Eleven property by itself. But here, we're able to do a lot of connections between the properties, not just because of the developer, but it was kind of what we had planned for with that 7-Eleven development to the north of it. So you not only have cross-access, but you'll have some kind of cross-signage allowances as well that they're proposing. So, and here's just a picture on the screen of our kind of the proposal that's before you guys, and what it would look like kind of at the end. So give you an idea. The subject property is, again, 2 interior tenant lots on the western side of Harlem Avenue, near the intersection of 171st and Harlem. And this is just south of that 7-Eleven gas station site that was here, I think more than a year ago. I think it was even pre-COVID or right as it was happening that came before us. And it's currently under construction, so it's actually looking like a convenience store now. So I believe the tanks are in the ground, the C-store is going up, and the canopy's not up there yet, but they're moving along fairly quickly there. And the subject property sites are to the south of this. They're zoned R1. They previously had vacant single-family homes on it, much like the home that was to the north of it with the 7-Eleven site. But with that development, we had them actually demolish all 3 homes as a condition of the approval, and that's because at the time, all 4 of these lots were owned by the same underlying owner. But Equity was really only doing that 7-Eleven site at the time, but they did agree while they were out there demoing that home, they would go ahead and do all 3, and that really took care of some kind of blighted property maintenance issues that we had out there with those homes kind of deteriorating along Oak Park or along Harlem Avenue. So they had agreed to that at that time, and so now it's them coming back to those sites and proposing really kind of phase 2 of this development that's going on out there. And again, that took place in 2020, the demo did, and then so far this year, they've been moving fairly quickly, following their a kind of long approval process with Cook County and IDOT. They're finally moving though, so we're glad to see that construction happening and happening quickly. The background kind of on this area, it's a fairly unique area because the west side of Harlem was originally developed all single-family homes on Harlem in the 50s and 60s. Harlem was also like a 2 to 3 lane road. Starting in the 1980s, though, this area really started a transition from residential to commercial uses, and that's because Harlem became obviously heavier traveled, it became a bigger road, and then a lot of it had to happen kind of with the Jewel Shopping Center across the street as well that happened. It really kind of transitioned this pretty rapidly after its initial development. Normally it's longer than 20, 30 years from the time you start getting tear downs. But it's obviously an attractive area due to the traffic for businesses to locate, and then also kind of an unattractive place for people to live. So I think that kind of sped that up fairly quickly to see that transition happen. So there's a number of uses that have kind of come in on this west side and either converted the homes or tore them down and constructed new ones. The area's either kind of been converted with B4 zoning or B1 zoning, so there's a little bit of a mix out there. Following this development, there'd only be one really residential home, or I guess currently there's only kind of one residential home that's in use on that whole block, and it's actually sandwiched between 2 developments now. So how that redevelops I don't know, but we'll kind of just have one property that's left to really be redeveloped from residential to something more commercial. And again, so the B1 and the B4 zoning districts have really been predominantly what's here, and that's really been because these back up to obviously existing single-family homes from when it was originally developed. So those B1, B4 uses are typically lower intensity uses, specifically relating to noise or odors or things like that. So you don't, B3 is a little more intensive and usually not up against residential. So that's where the B1, the B4 uses have kind of come in there. They're a little bit more low intensity uses. From a zoning perspective, you have the B1 to the north of this for the 7-Eleven property. To the south of this is actually zoned R1, but it's the parking lot for the DuPage Medical Group. I think this was done when they needed to expand their parking. I'm just kind of assuming here they tore down the house, expanded the parking lot attached to their building, but never formally rezoned it to B4. So that's something at some point in the future we need to fix, but we usually work that out with property owners to have them agree to it. So kind of a weird situation out there. It's zoned to R1, but really functions with that B4 use and would be rezoned at some point here in the future. And then to the south, you have the DuPage Medical Group offices there as well. To the east of this is the Jewel Osco Shopping Center, and then the Shell gas station. And then to the west of this are R1 zoned single-family homes. And talking about the rest of this, so you'll really see, and we kind of did it with 7-Eleven as well. This is obviously, give me 1 second while I clear this off. One of those views is really with that R1 zoning that's to the west. That's really kind of the key that we're looking at here from site planning perspective, from a zoning perspective. It's obviously kind of the most concern. I guess the thing we want to look at here is you have obviously residents to the west. We want to make sure they're still in a comfortable living environment, even with these transitions. So you'll kind of see that throughout the site plan, the zoning, landscaping, lighting. We've really tried to take that into account with the developer, make sure there's not any negative effects that kind of spill over to those residential zones. From a site plan perspective, obviously there's the commercial building, parking, drive-through lane, walkways, landscaping throughout the site. This is obviously a tight parcel, and that's kind of what we dealt with the 7-Eleven site as well. On these infill sites, you really don't have much flexibility to add additional width, so you're kind of working with some pretty tight confines here. So from a lot perspective, it's a little bit smaller than what kind of new business development lots are, but we are able to kind of jam a lot in there and still get some good kind of landscaping, good attractive landscaping to it, and it really kind of fits with the rest of the development on that east side of Harlem. So so there's a few exceptions attached to that as well, and I can kind of go over them all later. But it just deals with the lot size. So there's a minimum lot width for B1 shopping center districts, as well as kind of lot widths, lot minimums in general. And the B1s, again, our zoning code's written in 1978. So picture kind of what you see on 80th Avenue. with kind of one major shopping center, all the parking in front of it, and that just being your kind of typical neighborhood shopping center. So I think that's what their vision was in 1978. I maybe don't agree with that either. Now you kind of want to see maybe some smaller stuff, buildings pushed up more closer to the front. And we like to see them interconnected between pedestrian and automobiles, so that way you maybe don't have as many curb cuts. Or if you turn in at the wrong turn, you don't have to go back out onto the roadway to kind of find your way through the site. So we like seeing that interconnection now, but maybe not the same vision as they had in 1978 for a neighborhood shopping center. Access to the site, so they're going to have a curb cut on Harlem Avenue at the south end, the southeast corner of the site, but there'll also be cross-access to the north, where 7-Eleven has a right-in, right-out access on Harlem, as well as access on 171st and cross-access to the bank to the west. So all three of those sites are kind of going to be interconnected, the bank, the 7-Eleven, and then this site. And that really helps, again, for that traffic flow, as you can have somebody turn in at the bank and get over here to 7-Eleven, and vice versa. So you start to have people not have to go back out on the streets if they make the wrong turn. And we kind of wish this would have happened earlier, as they were doing all these redevelopments to the south of this, but it really didn't. They're all kind of have their own curb cuts, and they're all kind of siloed within themselves. So some of that does happen to the south of this. What we planned for is at least for there to be cross-access to the south with this project. So if DuPage Medical ever wants to redevelop that site, we can kind of work with that connection to happen. And again, maybe that can continue further south to kind of have that cross-access continue between all the properties. So it won't happen with this site because that DuPage Medical parking lot already exists. But honestly, it would benefit them probably as well to have the cross-access later. So, and again, the new access points right in, right out. There'll be a raised pork chop there because there's no median at that point on Harlem Avenue. Our expectation is that we would like to kind of have that raised pork chop, and IDOT's likely to require that as well. And again, this will all kind of be, IDOT has some very specific requirements for anything you're doing within their right-of-ways, like Harlem Avenue. And I think they learned that through the 7-Eleven one. I think they knew it, but there was a lot of requirements there for signage, access points, widths, radiuses. They really go over everything. So our engineer has taken a look and is comfortable with what they're proposing, but the specifics are all going to be subject to IDOT requirements, obviously, because it's their road. The drive aisles throughout the site meet all the drive aisle widths, and the drive aisle lane is 23 feet wide, but that extra width is really there to kind of have that escape lane or drive around lane, so you can still kind of circulate through the building even with the stacked vehicles in the drive-through. So all the widths of these do meet the requirements, since that lane would only have to be wide enough for a one-way access point, but they do, again, add that kind of extra width there on the west side of the property where the drive-through lane. And again, this is kind of that counterclockwise circulation there with the stacking happening on the west side of the building. And then that's where you take your order, and then the south side of the building where you see the Starbucks logo, that's where you're picking up your coffee or whatever other drinks they have there, and you're on your way. So you kind of have that counterclockwise circulation with stacking, and this one has even more vehicles than the other site. It's kind of a new build. They're obviously able to put an emphasis to make sure there's as much stacking as they can get, and Starbucks is obviously comfortable with it, but I think they'd have 50 cars stacking if they could, but obviously some of that's unrealistic. But I think they've done a good job with the layout here, making sure they have a dedicated lane with as much stacking as they can. Again, here, if you get some extra cars beyond what they're showing or what's typical, it stacks within the site still, so that's where it'll stack in a parking lot. Can it block some vehicles and be inconvenient for a little bit? Sure, but it'll be rare, and as Javier alluded to, it's usually in the mornings. Is their kind of main peak time, and you usually don't have as many of the other businesses open as well there. So with that, I'll note Starbucks does have hours of operation that vary a little bit, but they're generally 4:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. or 4:35 a.m. to about 9 p.m. So they're not necessarily set on that. They've been a little flexible, and it's changed a little bit through COVID as well. But they usually open for that early morning work crowd around 4:30, 5 a.m., and then stay open until 9 to 10 p.m., depending on the location. I think it can vary a little bit. And again, this is Starbucks is kind of their premier tenant on this one. And they're going to drive most of the traffic, kind of be that anchor tenant. And they'll be taking 2,202 square feet on this one. And the overall building will have 7,279 square feet of leasable commercial space. And then that additional a little over 5,000 square feet, that's going to be up to 3 other tenants, and kind of similar to the other one, it could be anywhere from 1 to 3. So kind of depends on who they get and who they attract there, but they could have up to 3 tenants on that property. Similarly to the previous project, this one had a specific parking and traffic analysis from KLOA. A little bit more in depth with a little more specifics here because it's a new build site. They really wanted to make sure it worked. We also had our consultants at Robinson Engineering take a look at it and make sure that everything looked right and they were using accurate data. And they had a few comments, but were generally in agreement that the conclusions they reached were accurate. So they had a suggestion for a stop sign between the properties as well that we'll look at implementing with the final site plan that'll come before you guys at the public hearing. So most of the other stuff was kind of minor changes throughout it, so there'll be a few tweaks to that KLOA report based on our consultant's comments, but nothing that'll overly change the site plan. And they were in agreement kind of with the parking as well as the traffic analysis working. And with the drive-through totals kind of that we talked about with these, again, I think we all know Starbucks is pretty busy, and that's a good thing. We like to see our businesses be successful, and again, hopefully, I know the one on 159th, we've had some complaints that there's a lot of stacking happening there. And it is a very tight site. Even the drive aisles feel very tight over there between the 2 outlets. But also, hopefully, here you'll be sharing some of that traffic. People go out of their way to find Starbucks, so some may go here instead of to 159th. So I think they'll still be very busy, but maybe some of those immediate stacking issues are kind of relieved by them having a few properties open. So, and with that, I'll also say I think they can maybe address it. The majority of their business is really through the drive-through lane now. So not only most of it is obviously people driving to the site, but the majority of that in their business is through the drive-through lane now. And I think that has spiked quite a bit, obviously, during COVID, not just even as they've been opening up the inside. So it is a little hard. I know they had a difficult time. You can't really do a this isn't a good time to kind of do some parking or a drive-through count, because it's really not the typical way. And it might stay a little higher than it was before, but I think it is starting to fall a little bit as people open up back inside and people have vaccines. So it's hard, again, to do those counts during COVID, just not typical times. So they've used kind of some of more of the Starbucks counts they've used long-term, as well as some information they had on the Lyle location as well. So this will have a trash enclosure as well on the northwest corner, sized for Starbucks and the other commercial tenants. And again, exterior brick matching the facade of the building. An outdoor patio here as well, a little bit smaller than the other one. And this one's gonna have a knee wall around it, instead of the patio fencing that they have at the other location. And that kind of, it obviously protects them, but also kind of keeps it open enough for people to feel like they're sitting outside and in a nice environment. So our first open item is really, again, just that review of the site plan, layout, circulation, the drive-through stacking, and then those exceptions kind of related to the overall site plan. And kind of our usual comment on these that are a little bit newer sites that might have some engineering work, that we always kind of want this to be subject to final engineering approval, because with stormwater, IDOT, all those things can kind of minorly affect the site plan and what they're proposing here. So we've just requesting a condition for final engineering. Landscaping wise, this again is short of what the village's landscape code is, but the village's landscape code is really designed for kind of green development. So think of something that is going into a field or a location that really wasn't previously developed. So it works for those sites, but it's very difficult to utilize in these infill sites. So you guys have seen these charts before that our landscape consultant goes through, and it's really a full analysis to make everyone aware if they're short, where they're short, and what type of landscape they're short. But you guys have also seen these waivers, I think, on the majority of our projects. And that's something we're working on, and staff is aware as well, as maybe there's a better way to allow for this on kind of redevelopment or infill sites that I think need to be treated a little different, because you have some pretty tight confines here. And I think if you met the landscape code to a T here, you might have like 5 parking stalls left. So it's tough on these sites. So what they have done, though, is try and really put the landscaping in areas where it has the most effect, or the best effect for what we're trying to do with the landscape code. And that's really the frontage along Harlem, where we want it to have a nice appearance to everyone driving by. And what they've done here really ties in with 7-Eleven. So it's the same consultant, the same developer, really tying in, kind of having that same plan. So it'll look similar, kind of like one development happening. Same thing with the rear of the property on the west property line, where we really wanted to make sure there was some hardy landscaping there to block views, sounds, any type of noise that might happen. And really, they added some good shrubs, but some hardy trees in there as well. One of our recommendations here was to maybe do evergreen trees, so they swapped out the typical canopy trees to more evergreen spruce trees, and those are really to give year-round screening here that can maybe help, again, keep those views and any type of noise or things that might be unattractive that the residents don't want to see, and then screen that year-round, not just in the summer and spring and fall, but in the winter when the leaves are dead on trees, it'll still be screened here. So they've really, I think, done kind of jammed in what they could here with the site, and it's again very similar to what we had to deal with on the 7-Eleven site. Looking at where it goes. On that west side, I'll also say they continue the fencing that was run at the 7-Eleven site, and then the bank site, they're going to continue that same 8-foot PVC fencing all the way down through this development. So you'll have an 8-foot tall PVC solid privacy fence in addition to that landscaping there that really, again, stop any views, any headlights, noise that might happen, and really help try and buffer that as good as possible. It also creates a nice look to have a consistent looking fence line across all those properties. So that's our other open item, or the third open item is just to discuss, again, the landscaping that they proposed here. And again, they've worked with staff already kind of on this to adjust it and really get in what they can along those couple frontages, as well as fill in any kind of available space with landscaping they can on the site. So, architecturally, the design uses high-quality materials, so the majority of it is face brick, and then there's kind of that stone ledge base as well for a couple feet along the base. All mechanical is going to be rooftop mechanical equipment that'll be screened by the rooftop parapet. And if you look at the architectural plans that came with the packet, they gave kind of an elevation of what those will look like, where the mechanical equipment sits in regards to the rooftop and the parapet. So those will be screened. The majority of this is going to be brown and espresso, and then there's a Starbucks portion of the building on the south side or the left elevation here. That's going to be a little bit darker black gray color brick, and I think that is very obviously Starbucks driven. I think that's kind of the color they look to do, but it also kind of helps accentuate what's really the primary tenant here in the shopping center. Even if Starbucks goes away, I think this is going to be an attractive spot. I don't see Starbucks leaving locations very often, but so hopefully they're here for a long time. But even if they left in the future, I think you'd still have this be your primary tenant. So it kind of draws some attention to that location, as well as creates a little bit of not such a monotonous look, I guess, across the building that you see a lot of times with these outlet buildings. There is a slight offset there between those bricks, so it's not a flat transition on this front side. You have a little bit of an offset of about 6 inches to a foot between that brown brick and then the black-gray brick that comes out from that. So, there's metal awnings again on the front facade of those kind of 2 corner anchor tenants that'll be on the building that'll match. And then the dumpster enclosure is also planned to match this in its brick color. So our fourth item is just reviewing the architectural renderings here. It's a little different, and so you guys may have comments. The main thing that kind of has a little harsher transition is at the rear of this, where you have the 2 bricks kind of collide on a flat face. But it still has the same design to the brick going through it, and they're not overly kind of completely contradicting colors there. So, and it's the back side of the building here where the drive-through drives next to. So that's a little unique. I'm not sure if you guys have any comments on that. Signage, this is very similar to the location on LaGrange Road, so they're just doing kind of a similar sign with a brick base that matches the Starbucks color brick, and then a kind of just metal, traditional cabinet that would be on there, and that'll have Starbucks as well as the other 3 tenants on it. As part of the PUD that I'll go over in a minute, they're also looking to have some shared signage between 7-Eleven and Starbucks, so they have those shared entrances, as well as I think you'll have people from Starbucks going to 7-Eleven and vice versa. So I think it really helps with the cross-access to have that shared signage, especially for kind of the 2 main anchors of these developments. So as part of those PUD regulations, they've requested for both the signs on 7-Eleven and the Starbucks site to have off-site signage, which typically isn't permitted, but it has to keep within the PUD. So anything within the PUD can really be on those signs. And we've done this at multiple shopping centers that have outlots. It's kind of typical that if you have a PUD, it can allow for some freedom of signage between all those parcels. The second sign that's part of this approval is the 7-Eleven sign. So originally this came before you guys. They didn't quite have it narrowed down, but they're requesting that to be 11 feet, and that really allows them to get all of the information they need on the sign. With 7-Eleven, Mobile, which is the gas provider, the prices, and then to allow Starbucks to have really a prominent position kind of on that corner, since this will really be the most visible sign. If someone's looking for Starbucks, this might be the sign they see. So they've asked for kind of 1 foot height allowance on this to allow it to work for the whole development and fit everything they need on there. With that additional foot, it also goes up to about 128 square feet in size instead of the 120-foot maximum. So just pretty minor requests there, but allow them to kind of get everything they need and for it to be visible on that sign and readable as cars are doing. I'll say 45, but I think we can confidently say people drive more than 45 on Harlem Avenue. So it'll still stay visible. Obviously, they could shrink everything. I'm not sure how visible that would be on that corner, though. So that is the 5th open item. It's just reviewing the signage and the exceptions related to that 1 foot and the size specifically of the 7-Eleven sign at the intersection of 171st and Harlem Avenue. Parking, so this requirement is for 47 stalls based on that 6.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. They have 44 stalls on this site. So a shortage or exception request of 3 parking stalls. As I said before, parking's kind of an imperfect science. Our zoning code's dated fairly far back to 1978. I think it overestimates it a little bit here, and that's kind of what the KLOA analysis gets at here on this site, as well as that this is really pretty typical of what you'd see on a shopping center in terms of the spaces per square footage now. So to some degree, we have parking variations pretty regularly here. It's somewhat kind of up to the developer and the owner to know how many spaces they're going to have and if that's adequate for the tenants they want. And they feel confident here this will do fine, because it's really to their detriment. If they didn't have enough parking here, it really limits what kind of businesses you can get. So I think going forward, they know that. And obviously, if this ended up being 4 restaurant tenants, it's just not going to work. So, or you wouldn't have a Starbucks and a full sit-down restaurant and the rest of it. It's just not going to work with the parking stalls. So they'll kind of have to manage that going forward. But again, I think 44 stalls, based on the size of this, is pretty typical and should work. And again, that's kind of difficult to predict with these multi-tenant properties, so. Our open item 6 is reviewing the parking and the exception related to that. Lighting, typically I breeze past this, but I'll just say we did focus on the lighting plan, knowing you have residents to the west of this. So not just with the landscaping side of it, where we want to make sure it's buffered as much as possible, that they're planting those evergreen trees, and they're planting them, I believe, at 6 to 8 feet in height, so that way they're hardy from the beginning, and kind of can take root and be substantially buffer it from the very beginning of the development. But we also just looked at the lighting in general, and this is what we did with 7-Eleven as well, trying to minimize the visibility to any kind of light sources here. So to make sure they're positioned in a way that isn't very visible, and if they're going to be a little bit visible to the west, make sure there's good landscaping that's very specifically buffering it from those views. So here they've kind of limited, there's only a handful, I believe, 6 LED light poles on the site, most of them positioned on the east side of this at the front. And then there's 5 wall-mounted LED light fixtures, most of those on the north and west sides of the building, and those are obviously usually we're kind of right above the doors that are out there for security purposes, but then those are a lot less tall than the light pole lights. So those won't be as visible to the west, and they'll even be usually kind of below the height of that fence or the landscaping that's there as well. So we worked on that to not have light poles there and back that might shed light to the west. So spend a little more time on that, but I think it's important, and that was a big one with the 7-Eleven development as well, obviously with the gas station. They had a lot of light with the canopy that we wanted to make sure was controlled, so we looked at that here as well. One thing I missed was the speaker position with the site plan is about 180 feet. So from where that speaker is going to be to the home to the west, you have about 180 feet. And then it's further than that even to the building or any of the lights. So you're closer to 190 to 200 feet from building to building or from the lights to that home to the west. And again, we focus on the lighting, landscaping, fencing to really try and mitigate any impacts there. I won't go through all these. These are kind of the exceptions, I guess, to the code that aren't fully compliant with the code that are being covered by the PUD. Most of these very similar to what was requested with 7-Eleven in regards to their variations. When it's not a PUD, it's called a variation. When it's a PUD, it's considered an exception. So you really look at, okay, it's a unique development. What can happen here? And we just want to call out what isn't really meeting the code, but again, fairly unique development, and I think they've done the best they can trying to counter any negative effects with their development here in terms of landscaping, lighting, fencing, and then overall site design. So our open items to review that with the PUD and the rezoning, they're asking to go from their current R1 zoning to B1 zoning, similar to that 7-Eleven development. And then they've also asked for a few use exceptions there. So there's a couple uses in the B3 that they thought really don't have any negative effects that would affect the residential, that they kind of wanted to have the ability if they found those tenants to come here. So a few of those are the drive-through, which is typically only permitted in the B3. So they've requested that, obviously specifically for Starbucks, and with the thought process that this is very specifically designed to have a drive-through, and help counter any negative effects of that. So it allows for just that one drive-through facility on the site that's planned there. There's also automotive parts and accessory sales, office supply and equipment sales, and general personal service establishments, so spas, massages, one-on-one personal training. That's kind of a more generic one, but they're really just kind of service establishments where you go into an office and get some type of service. So those are ones that aren't typically allowed in the B1 and are allowed in the B3 that they thought don't have any really spillover effects that would hurt either the commercial around them or the residential to the west. So. Last but not least, we have the plat of subdivision. And that's really, it's consolidating the two lots, and then you have drainage utility easements that are platted on it, the cross-access easements to the north and south as well. So our engineer has reviewed that and is happy with it. So that will be something you guys are voting on as well to bring to the village board for approval. And that's it. So I'll give it back to you, Chairman.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. That's a thorough presentation. Lots of open items. This is Chairman Gray. So at this time, I'm going to ask our commissioners to comment on some of these open items, beginning with Commissioner Gatto.
I think Dan did a great job. I really don't have any other questions.
Okay. Commissioner Manny, any questions or comments?
I think I'm good with the open items, like number one, the site plan looks pretty good. I think the only thing that concerns me is the amount of parking that's here. Depending what those other spaces will become, will it hurt, the other businesses, when this little strip center is, totally full. I'm wondering, is it possible, or has the architect, I'm looking at the parking that's facing Harlem. I mean, could that be dragged down, like the whole piece dragged down like 8 feet to accommodate more parking that's to the north? Put another little, parking spot there? Because that's where it connects to the proposed 7-Eleven, correct?
Yeah, and that's
the connection.
really in line with the 7-Eleven. Keep that in line with the 7-Eleven drive aisle. So you typically don't, at those kind of pinch points between the two properties, you don't want to stall there. That's going to back out, I think, right into that aisle. And then right to the north of that is actually the access to the 7-Eleven. So that's the right in, right out. So it's giving a little bit of buffer from that access point to before the parking starts as well. So you could maybe fit it.
The types, the land, and it's tight. I think that's only my concern, just the parking, but everything else looks nice. The architecture looks, I like it,
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can let them respond to that.
Commissioner.
Yeah, I can let them respond to that. We struggle with the parking too, especially on multi-tenant properties when you don't, you don't know who's going to go in there first, but it's going to change over the next 20, 30, 50, 100 years, the building's there. So it's a difficult calculation, but parking has gone down quite a bit, parking demands. But it is somewhat reliant on the owners to kind of regulate it. It's going to depend on what kind of tenants they get and can get.
Right. All right. It looks good, though.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Commissioner Manny. I will then ask Commissioner West for any comments or discussion.
Yeah, thanks for a very thorough presentation, Dan. I really like the idea about using evergreens to keep that screening in place year-round, so you don't have the, it's only sheltered part of the year situation. I will, again, I know I sound like a broken record. I will put in a plug for a bike rack here. I didn't see one in this mock-up, and I'll apologize. I had my notes in the wrong place. So I think this is the item where it is required based on the code. But I would like to see where that's going to go so that we can encourage that kind of activity.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll note the one thing I did forget to say is they're adding a public sidewalk here. So they're extending that sidewalk finally to the south. So it's good to see that continuing down Harlem. But agree with the bike parking, and we'll see where we can fit in a rack, even if it's a spot or two. I think that helps customers and employees who might want to bike there.
And that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner West. And Commissioner Gaskell, any comments?
No, I have no comments.
Okay. This is Chairman Gray. I just have a few comments, and I know open item one, it's a relatively big variation, but to staff's point, the original planning was for residential, and that area, that corridor down Harlem has changed considerably since then. And, and this is, some of the same exceptions were for that 7-Eleven and gas station. And I think this, the added access to the site from the 7-Eleven to the north and the bank, the south, will help that flow. So I think, it's a good use of the property, despite the variations in terms of what the code says. I think having, prior to even the 7-Eleven, you had 3 empty houses there. So I think this is good repurposing. I do like the recommendation from staff about using the raised pork chop for the egress, because it'll definitely discourage people from trying to take a left across Harlem from that curb cut. And so I think that's very good. And as staff mentioned, there's with those connected areas to the gas station and to the bank, there'll be other ways people can access the site. So I do like that quite a bit. And I'm also glad that they're extending the PVC wall and using the evergreens as well. I think that west buffer is the most important. When I pass by the site, it's still pretty open right now to the residences to the west. So I think it's very critical just to be a good neighbor, to have that west buffer fortified all year round. And I think the PVC fence helps reduce that noise as well. And I'm glad that it's a solid privacy fence, and that it also connects to the 7-Eleven and the bank as well. So I think that's overall good planning. One thing I do want to mention, and this is something related also to the last project, is I know staff, Dan, you mentioned that perhaps we'll have to revisit the code because obviously Starbucks will have to do a separate public hearing for a drive-through board, which is typical for a Starbucks. So perhaps to revisit this going forward, just to streamline the process somewhere down the line, just so we're not going to say, okay, well, this is passing, but we're going to have 2 more public hearings down the line in the pipeline. So perhaps revisit that as this may become, more common.
Yeah.
I didn't have an issue with some of the other open items, like the signage, 1 square foot. I think that's minor. That's okay. The parking, as I believe Javier said in the last open item, 60% of Starbucks is drive-through. So I think, to staff's point, the parking may be, the parking requirement may be a little bit overestimated. However, as staff also mentioned, who knows what's going to be the makeup in 20 years, 10 years. and maybe 100 if the building lasts that long. But I think it's a reasonable variation, yeah. So those are basically my comments. I'm okay with the R1 to the B1, and I think the list of exceptions for some of the other establishments for those tenants, I think are reasonable. Again, parking is tricky. I don't think that should cause an overflow. But generally speaking, I like the plan. I know this will be the Starbucks my wife visits because it's close to us. And Dan, you had said in your presentation, what do they sell besides coffee? Well, caramel macchiatos, chocolate croissants, and a lot of other goodies too, which I know my wife will be there quite often. So this looks like a good plan. Those are my comments. Right now, is there?
And don't forget
does the petitioner want to?
Don't forget the chai lattes
go ahead, Dan.
too. I said don't forget the chai lattes too. To respond to respond to your drive-through board comment though, honestly, this might be the one that if they come forward with 2 public hearings for drive-through menu boards, it's part of the reason. It sounds like a broken record sometimes, but we're extremely busy right now. So it's been difficult to get ahead on text amendments, but it would save me time to do one change instead of 2 public hearings. So there's always a chance this is the one that maybe triggers it, because we've had that request come before you guys a few times. Doesn't seem like anyone's had any major concerns. So we may look at, even if it's just a really minor change, if it helps avoid public hearings all by themselves, we may look at that here in the near future. So, good thoughts there.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. And, while you were talking, it reminded me too of, I know you mentioned Robinson Engineering reviewed the plans. I do think that's a good idea to have those stop signs that they suggested between the properties. I think that's a pretty good recommendation there from Robinson Engineering. With that, I will ask the petitioner that's here today, David and Javier, if there's anything you guys wish to present or say anything to the commission at this time.
Yeah, thank you. David Sasson again, on behalf of the petitioner. Just a couple comments and maybe a thought about the signboard. I know that there are variations, and it's kind of unusual for me to come to Tinley Park with this many variations, because usually we work as staff, but 3 of the variations are basically an integration between this project and the 7-Eleven, the cooperation on signage, and the fact that this project was planned as a continuation. For example, the frontage shows a substantial variation, but when you look at this as one project, which this is almost phase 2 of the same project. Our client, as part of the 7-Eleven, was asked and agreed to demolish those 2 houses, kind of on a faith of the project, not having at that point ownership of this lots, and now we are in to finish the job. So that was one comment. From day one, our biggest concern with 7-Eleven in this was being good neighbors, and we've taken, I think, a lot of time. Our planners work with the village, and we're very proud of the screening, the buffering, and all that we've been able to do. Every Starbucks that goes in and every light fixture that goes in is subject to the new technology. And I think the board and the commission can be assured that that speaker, with the type they use now, will not be an intrusion on the neighbors. And we're also very happy about that. Finally, the bike rack, I have the same comment I did on the first one. We'll figure out where to put it, and we'll work with the staff on it. My final thought was these signboards and public hearings. Could we consider, on both these projects, some kind of language in the recommendation to the board that, should there be a text amendment allowing them, that we would be able to then install them at a later time, or merely work with the staff on a minor variation, because they're every development that serves with a drive-through seems like they have them now. It's just something that's done, and it's done tastefully and done in a very efficient and high-class manner. And it would save the commission, it would save the board, and perhaps we can just merely, at some point in the future, present those plans and work with the staff to their satisfaction, which I'm sure would satisfy the standards of the village.
Yeah, it was my preference that they actually just present us. Starbucks has a preview menu board they kind of utilize now, I think. I think they could probably pull something up of the most recent ones. You could sit here if you need to talk to anymore. So if they can supply us with just an example, we could kind of preemptively, it's what we did with the ground sign on 7-Eleven, was going to preemptively grant some variations knowing they would need a setback variation. So this one, if they can give us a good example of what they're going to put up there, because we usually limit the size of those, so you can't have 2 full drive-through menu boards that are 80 square feet or whatever. But to say, okay, you're allowed a 6-foot tall, 20 square foot sign, I think we'd be open to that. So go ahead and, if they can give us some dimensions, pull one from kind of the most recent Starbucks around here, and we can write that into the
We will work on that.
okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments again, David, and Dan, thanks for discussing potential for the signboards with him as well. I do want to mention, good point on the continuation of the project, David. There is a uniformity, and I also appreciate the concerted effort and the conscientious effort to be a good neighbor. So it is appreciated.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the staff. They've worked very hard on this project for many months, and the presentation's always good. That's a given with your staff. But it's a pleasure to be back here.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we appreciate it, David. We don't want to take you and Javier's time too much more. We're coming towards the end of the meeting, so we appreciate your time today. And with that said, is there, do any commissioners have any other comments at this time after hearing David and some of the other comments? Speak up now. Okay, hearing none. I just want to announce there will be a public hearing, and I want to make sure I get the date right. Dan, it's on May 27th, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so David and Javier, there will be a public hearing on this item, May 27th, 2021. Get with staff, so it's the same time for the other property. Just get with staff on how you can attend. And gentlemen, we appreciate you burning the midnight oil here and staying a little bit longer.
Thank
you,
you.
and good luck with the project.
And thank you and the commission.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, at this time, we will move on to the good of the order. Staff, do you have any comments for the good of the order?
The next meeting is still May 20th, so that one's not canceled. We are still having a May 20th meeting, and then there's also the special meeting on May 27th. So that'll have these items on it. So the next meeting, May 20th, it's, I would expect a little bit longer one. It includes a larger industrial development that would include rezoning. That'll be near to the Amazon building. So we've been working through those kind of final plans, and that'll be coming to you guys on May 20th. And that would, you guys will be reviewing kind of the rezoning, a PUD with that, as well as some of the final site plans. And it requires annexation as well. That'll go forward to the board. So excited to see that moving forward. And we did have some kind of preemptive meetings here, specifically on that project with the Odyssey residents that are kind of the nearest to that project. So we wanted to get them in the loop early on and try and get any feedback from them. So we had that a couple weeks ago. And they've continued to kind of work out some of the concerns those residents had. And that should be ready to come before you guys for a workshop on the 20th. So, and then special meeting on the 27th, so we've gotten enough responses to have a quorum for that meeting, so we appreciate that. Other than that, I'll leave it at that, so we can close this up.
Okay, no problem, Dan. This is Chairman Gray. So, staff, were there any public comments submitted or members of the public present right now wishing to speak today?
There was not.
Okay. So I'll move on to adjournment. If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
This is Commissioner Gatto, so moved.
This is Commissioner Manny. I second that motion.
This is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner Gatto, seconded by Commissioner Manny. I will take a voice vote. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. This meeting is adjourned at 9:21 p.m.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, all.
Thanks
Thanks, everyone.